I'm going to read you the official bio for Ryan, and then I'll add a personal twist to it as well, because I know him personally. So Ryan's a financial strategist trained as an Austrian economist, specializing exclusively in the infinite banking concept. He became an authorized IBC practitioner in October of 2017. He blogs frequently at medium.com, elaborating an Austrian approach to financial theory, strategy, and the infinite banking concept. In January of 2019, Ryan was accepted to enroll in a PhD program in Austrian Economics through the University of Francisco Marroquin in Guatemala, where he intends to further develop the Austrian approach to financial theory. Ryan lives in Lubbock, Texas, serving clients nationwide. In his spare time, he serves as a court-appointed special advocate, or CASA, for kids removed from their home by the state due to allegations of neglect or abuse. And Ryan ends his official bio by saying he may or may not frequent the local karaoke bar. So let me also mention, so Ryan, I've known him for several years, that he was at the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama, which is the hotbed of Austrian theory in the United States. And then also he was for a time in our PhD program at Texas Tech University, where I am also. So he's the real deal in terms of a theorist in the Austrian theory. And like I said also in my talk, Ryan and I on the side have been working on issues of the yield curve and how does that relate to Austrian business cycle theory. So you'll see Ryan actually is someone who is, as he says, getting a PhD in economics, specializing on the Austrian approach. And I think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised by the content he's going to give us here, where it is a true blue bona fide Austrian presentation, but yet is tied intimately with the infinite banking concept. So without further ado, put your hand together for Ryan Griggs.
Thank you, Bob. Everybody hear me okay? Yep. Cool. Glad everybody came back in, because the easy part is all at the beginning. So you wouldn't want to miss that. Quick housekeeping stuff. Let's see if I can work this. Ryan Griggs. I'm going through a brand transition. So right now my website's Fortune Paradigm. It will be Griggs Capital Strategies by the end of the month. But right now you can find me at fortuneparadigm.com. You can get these slides if you've got an internet connection. If you go to medium.com/@RyanD.Griggs, you can find these slides if you want them in front of you. I thought, like last year, that you'd have physical slides in front of you. So it breaks my heart a little bit that you don't, but that's okay. We'll go as methodically as we need to get through all the main points. You don't have to say, if you would have told me a few years ago that at 26 I'd be presenting on the main stage at the Nelson Nash Institute annual think tank, I would have looked at you funny, right? So the privilege and the honor of being able to present in front of you does not miss me, right? So I'm very thankful to Nelson, to Bob Murphy, to Carlos, and especially to David in organizing this particular venue for inviting me and allowing me to share some thoughts with you today. What we're going to talk about is Austrian capital theory. See, if I were to ask that, what is the infinite banking concept? In fact, I've got a story for you. So last Friday, I get a call. This individual had watched some of mine and James Nethery's Becoming Your Own Banker book review videos. And he's like, I watched videos, I read articles, I listened to Bob on the Tom Woods show talking about IBC. Man, this sounds good. I've already ordered the books, right? I'm pretty much all in. But what is this? And I think if I were to ask, what is the infinite banking concept? There's about 150, 160 people here. I might get 150 or 160 different answers. And I think the same goes for the definition of capital. And if I were to ask, what's the definition of capital, I'd probably get 150 or 60 different answers. Now that's a problem, because I believe that the definition of capital is the key to developing a full economic and financial framework based on Austrian economics. And if we don't have a good definition of capital, then we can't get that framework. So like in the physical sciences, right, in physics, you need relativity, right? Without relativity, you can't measure change over time relative to some external object, right? So you can't get distance or acceleration or velocity or any of this stuff, right? But the same principle holds for economic and financial thinking. We need relativity. We need a framework in which we can slide in the infinite banking concept so that we know what it is. Again, relative to other stuff. Right, so if I'm successful at the end of this talk, and you can tell me, because I hope I have enough time for Q&A, you can tell me if I've at least given you the foundations for that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Bob said I have an economist background, so I've been in a lot of economics classrooms. And economics teachers, for some reason, have this weird way of holding the punchline until the end of the class. All right, so 65 minutes go by, you're hating your life, and it's like, what's the point? Just tell me the point. Okay, so it's not a comedy routine. We put the punchline at the beginning. All right, now so this, I'm going to read this, because I know you don't have it in front of you, and if it doesn't make sense, that's good, because if it did, then there'd be no point for me to talk to you. Okay, so modern Austrian capital theory has lost its way. The current dominant idea is that capital is heterogeneous and physical. I'll explain both of those. But instead, when the founder of the Austrian School of Economics concentrated on capital, when he turned his full attention to it, he concluded instead that it is abstract and monetary. This is the idea of capital in Becoming Your Own Banker. The Mengerian idea of capital, I believe, is the foundation of banking. In order to bank, you have to have something to bank with. Right? So we have to talk about capital first, I believe, in order to fully understand how banking sits in this broader economic and financial framework. All right, so we have some implications here. I believe the Menger-Nash concept of capital, that it's abstract and monetary, should displace the current version in Austrian capital theory. It can and should transform how we think about financial strategy, and it should invigorate the defense of our industry against colluding legislators and special interests. I have a tendency to get fired up, so especially at that point, look out, first row. All right. Okay, so that's where we're going, but how are we going to get there? First, I got to tell you something about me, other than what Bob told you, so that you might find what I say credible. Two, we're going to get to the meat of it. Why is Nelson an heir, an intellectual heir to Karl Menger? That's going to be the dense part. There's going to be about 10 or 15 minutes where it's conceptually and theoretically dense. I'm sorry, but the definition has to be fixed, and so we've got to kind of go in on it, right? I'll try to make it simple and clear of what the real points that you need to grasp are. But we've got to talk about what capital is in the dominant view, the current view, and we've got to talk about what I think capital really is, right, in order to understand why Nelson is an heir to Menger. Okay, and then is this just abstract and esoteric? Is it just theory? Or does it actually matter, right? So point 3, we're going to talk about why it matters. We're going to talk about what it means to be undercapitalized versus well-capitalized and how that affects your approach to investing. We're going to talk about the problem, the single greatest drain on Americans, Canadians, global people, the single greatest drain on their resources today. We're going to talk about what that is. We're going to see how the infinite banking concept addresses that problem. And I believe it does so objectively, optimally. I think you can prove it, and I'll explain why. And then we'll talk about the agent in the industry. All right, a little about me. So I'm trained as an Austrian economist, as Bob told you. I'm from, originally, Redlands, California, Southern California. I have a bachelor's and master's in economics, mainstream economics, brutal economics. When I was in my master's program, I was very disillusioned, right? I wanted to be a professor of economics. I wanted to teach Austrian economics. So I was really unimpressed by mainstream economics. So I started looking at the biographies of people that I admired, that I respected in Austrian economics to see what else they were doing. What other things could I be involved in outside of academia? I know most of the organizations that Bob Murphy is affiliated with. I did not at the time know what the Nelson Nash Institute was. Looked it up, watched some videos, read some articles, ordered the book. It arrived 2 days later. I blew right through it twice in that night, and that night it clicked, which I think is a little faster than another Austrian economist in the room. I can poke fun at Bob because, They're cool like that. So yes, I was immediately hooked. About 3 months after I first investigated the infinite banking concept, I saw that Nelson would be presenting what was, I come to find out, one of his final seminars, a 2-day seminar, 2 hours on Friday, full day Saturday, at the incomparable Miss Kaylin Peterson. She hosted in Rancho Cordova, California. Kaylin's here. If you haven't met her, you should. Like Bob, I'm honored to call her a friend and a colleague in this business. She's read some of my blog posts and helped me with proofreading, which I hate. And so I knew then that I was going to do infinite banking in my own life, but I still had the idea that I wanted to be a professor of economics and change the world in that top-down fashion, right? Like Nelson says, it's hard to get rid of that top-down thinking. And the same was true for me, but I did get better. All right, so I applied to Texas Tech. It was the only university I applied to. Went there because Bob was there. Got in, got paid to go to class, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I know this is going to be on YouTube. That's just the truth. So I withdrew September 2017. I spent 2 weeks at a financial firm that is not represented here at this conference. And instead of a year, it took me 2 weeks to figure out that that wasn't going to be for me either. That's when I went through the practitioner program. That took about 4 days. At the time, I had the highest score, 98%, and I think something was wrong with the other 2 questions. Maybe, I don't know if it's changed. Anyway, so it was all very quick, and then I met my mentor, James Nether. Friend and mentor doesn't cover it. James is much more to that. He's been a host personally to me, a mentor outside of things other than just life insurance, Christianity, spirituality as well. I live in Lubbock, 5 hours west of Alvarado. I go to Alvarado about once a month. I spend a week there. So 25% of my time I spend person to person with James Nether. Like was mentioned earlier, we did produce a 5-part series on becoming your own banker. Can't look over there. On becoming your own banker. And I just want to say that video series is not meant to replace a thorough reading of Becoming Your Own Banker. Please do not get that perception. Whether you're here today or watching at home, please do not get that perception. Read the book. I can't be forceful enough about that. I probably can. I shouldn't be. But please read that book. This is meant to be a complementary perspective from 2 people who are in the business. One as an economist, another who is a veteran in the industry. One of the things that James has taught me is the difference between promotion and attraction when it comes to marketing. I don't do a lot to get in front of people and persuade them of my value to them. Right? My focus is primarily on education. That's why the BYOB book review. That's why all the blog posts. Right? I believe that if people are hungry, they need to be fed, and if they're going to look for answers, then we ought to provide it. And that should be the focus. And every minute I spend working on the messaging is a minute I don't work on the truth of the message. Now, I'm not saying it's exclusive, mutually exclusive. I'm not saying that you can't do promotion or you should only do one or the other. Right? But I do think I want to draw attention to the value of attraction, of taking an educational perspective, the counselor selling type perspective in talking to clients. I will say that one of the values of that is that you get a certain kind of client. You get a client who calls you. You don't have to call them. You get a client who is hungry for answers. They got a list. And at the bottom of that list is, what do I do next? It's a magical question. Let me tell you. Right? So you get a very unique kind of client. You get a client who wants to continue to learn, who's going to share you with other people. That's been my experience. And I did learn, that comes right from James. All right, let's get right into the meat of it. This next slide is the most dense slide there is, but let's plow right through it. This is the dominant view of capital in Austrian theory. The idea is that capital is the temporal structure of production. All right, so let's break down that mouthful. Temporal refers to time. Okay, production is sequential, right? Things happen further away from the act of consumption, Right? So in this diagram, that's mining and refining, right? Further away from the ultimate act of consumption. And things happen closer to the act of consumption, right? So because production occurs through time, we can organize these various stages, also called orders, of production as they relate to the ultimate act of consumption. Okay, so that gets you these stages of production, right? Now the idea here is that the capital part in all of this is the stuff. It's physical, right? It's the mines, it's the refineries, it's the manufacturing facilities, it's the distribution centers and so forth, all right? Now that physical stuff is heterogeneous in nature. Hetero just means different, right? Of unlike kind. That's all it is, right? It basically means that you can't just glom all this together and refer to all capital by the same denomination, the same unit, okay? That's all heterogeneous means. Again, this is the dominant view of Austrian capital. The key points are that that capital in this theory is physical in nature and heterogeneous. Now, I don't think, also, I'm not making this up, okay? So if you go to the slides on my Medium blog, you get this link. This goes to Roger Garrison, who talked at Mises University last year, and this comes virtually right from him. The title of his talk was Austrian Capital Theory, okay? So I'm not making this up. Again, key points. Capital is physical and heterogeneous in the dominant view. I don't think that's totally wrong, but I think the emphasis is misplaced. Now, the problem is that the view we just went over does come from Karl Menger. Karl Menger is the founder of the Austrian School of Economics. He wrote a book in 1871 called The Principles of Economics. That book started the Austrian school as we know it today. Right? In that book is this portion, this excerpt of a footnote. Okay, it's a German footnote, so it's a long footnote, right? So it's presented as an appendix in the current publication, but this was in a footnote. Right? And you can see here in the bold that I've added, capital consists only of those quantities of economic goods. Right? So it's very obvious that Menger's referring to a physical idea of capital. Right? So this little excerpt and this footnote grew up to be modern Austrian capital theory. And that's the source of the confusion. Right? The next view I'm going to present also comes from Menger. All right, this is Menger 2.0. Right, that first book, the excerpt we just looked at, was from 1871. This one is from an essay. It's actually called Zur Theorie des Kapitals. You got to pronounce it in German because it's still publicly unavailable in English. 130 years later. I regard this as a scholarly and intellectual tragedy. I don't have an explanation for it. It's the founder of an entire school of economic thought, and we haven't translated his views on capital. I don't get that. Fortunately, there's people like this guy, Ed Braun, I don't know. I've emailed with him back and forth a few times, but I can't pronounce his name. He lives in Germany, reads German, writes in English. He published an article in 2015 called Karl Menger's Contribution to Capital Theory. He's translated key excerpts from this later 1888 article. Right, so we can talk meaningfully in English about how his views changed, and they did change. In fact, you'll see that Braun believes that Menger repudiated his earlier claims about what capital is. This is from his abstract. The common interpretation of Karl Menger's take on capital theory rests upon a few sentences. We went over those sentences in his Principles of Economics. His later monograph on the topic, Towards a Contribution to Capital Theory, is more or less ignored, although it must be seen as a recantation of his earlier views. Furthermore, this is in his introduction. This is Menger in 1888, okay, Menger's changed his mind. Menger was of the opinion that capital must be interpreted in the way common parlance does, that is, as a homogenous concept, depicting sums of money on ordinary business accounts. In fact, he vigorously opposed all theories that dissented from this ordinary business view on capital, including the one that is commonly imputed to him. I don't know how much clearer we can get. All right, so a little recap. This is the dense part, but it's all recapped right here. Okay, so in A, we've got the modern view that capital is heterogeneous and physical in nature. But in B, when Menger spent 17 years and changed his mind, we have capital that's homogenous and monetary. Here's a good example of what makes the difference between homogenous and heterogeneous. Okay, what's the difference? The units. For heterogeneity, different, right? We have different units. A factory could be measured in acres, a farm in hectares, in a truck in tons, electricity in kilowatts, right? You can't directly reconcile things that are denominated in different units. But for a homogeneous concept, you can. They're directly reconcilable, okay? So if we're talking US dollars, the dollars in a bank account is technically reconcilable with the value of a car, for example. Right? Those dollar concepts can be compared. All right, so what is Menger's 1888 view on capital? This is Braun translating Menger. Not the concrete fixed assets or circulating assets as such, but only the sums of money they represent are, according to their character, as fixed or circulating assets, fixed or circulating capital. Equity in a house, that's capital. Cash value in life insurance, that's capital. Value of the assets in a business, in money terms, that's capital. It's not the business itself. It's not the life insurance policy itself. It's not the house itself. It's the monetary value. We're going to see why that's important in a second, but I love this. Menger is vicious. He's like, the use of a new idea of capital as physical in nature is a serious terminological aberration. In the course of the exposition, this new notion, he's writing way back when, so this new notion would be the physical notion. This new notion of capital as physical stuff was tacitly identified with the popular notion, be it because of carelessness or unclarity of mind. Imagine economists being careless and unclear in mind. No science, least of all a science like economics, which deals with the phenomena of everyday life, has the right to arbitrarily redefine popular terms. I get a little frustrated because I really truly believe the reason we don't have an Austrian theory of finance is because we don't have a sound understanding of capital. And this is why. All right, so what is capital in becoming your own banker? Well, it certainly matters. I've counted, he says the word 73 times in one form or another. Capitalize, recapitalize, capital. In 72 of those 73 times, the context is obviously monetary. You can check for yourself. In the other 73rd time, he's got stock in parentheses. It's clear that he's referring to a capital stock, right? The inventory of a business. Key point is that in becoming your own banker, capital is monetary. Capital is property value in money terms with acquisitive purpose. Right? So the value of a car that you've driven for 10 years that you don't intend to leverage to acquire assets, that's not capital. It's just the market value of the car. Right? But $50,000 equity in a house that you intend to leverage and acquire another car with, that's capital. Because the purpose of that value is to acquire other stuff. Right? And this is the definition. This isn't stated per se, verbatim, in becoming your own banker, but this is effectively the meaning. And as I said earlier, cash surrender value, that's also capital. So I get that question, what is the infinite banking concept? It's just the best way to build and use capital. And we'll come back to that too. Here's some implications of this argument. Capital is a distinct thing. It is fundamentally different than investment. This is what's going to come out in part 3. I believe it's the key to a theory of Austrian finance. It is also a breaking point from conventional financial advice. As we'll see in part 3, I think that this kind of thinking is something that allows me, allows you, allows us to differentiate ourselves from all the other crazies out there. And finally, I just love this. This is, nerding out right here. Becoming your own banker is a work in applied Mengerian capital theory, and it might be the only one. Why does this matter? To understand why this matters, we have to understand how capital can be used. I believe capital can be used in two ways. You can either leverage the value or you can liquidate the asset. Let's take equity for in the house example. If you're going to leverage that value, you borrow against it, right? If you're going to liquidate the house, you've got to sell it off, right? You'll pay off the lender, whatever's left over, that's the cash you'll use to buy other things. Right? In leverage, you're going to pay interest. In liquidation, you pay the opportunity cost of lost interest. Right? Some of the benefits to leveraging, I think primarily, is that you get to enjoy the services of both assets. If you're going to leverage the equity in your house, you don't have to sell your house. You can still live in it and enjoy the services of the car. Whereas with liquidation, you have to get rid of one. With leverage, you have a potential for growth. The value of the house can rise. If you're super high level and you're capitalizing and dividend paying whole life, you get compounding. The only financial asset in which you get compounding on a guaranteed basis. If you liquidate, you're interrupting the growth, right? That the increasing value of that home will never accrue to you. You've sold the asset off. In leverage, what we care about is control. If the idea of capital is that it's money value with acquisitive purpose, right, we want to use it, well then obviously we need control over that value. Otherwise we can't use it. But with liquidation, that's exactly what we're doing. We're giving up control, forfeiting it off, literally selling the property title to somebody else. Of course, as with all popular delusions, the one that's preferable is unpopular, and the one that's not preferable is popular. Dave Ramsey, bottom right corner. My favorite part of becoming your own banker is part 3. James Nethery's is part 4, and part 4 is what made me see the light, really. But as I've thought about this more, part 3 has become my favorite. Because in one page, Nelson proves logically, literarily, without throwing big numbers or big words at you, that leverage done properly is preferable to liquidation when it comes to the use of capital. That's what that bar chart shows. The bar chart should be on this slide, but we're not perfect. All right, if capital is a pool of financial value to be used to acquire other stuff, which it is, why would you ever want to liquidate the asset? The whole goal is to continue to accumulate more capital. So liquidation's off the table as the optimal way to deploy capital. All right, does your client get it? 2 questions you hear. The words we use reveal the thoughts in our mind. How much premium do I have to pay? My response to that question is, I don't know. How much capital is too much for you? I don't know about you, but I can't have too much capital. My demand for capital is literally infinite. Keyword there appears elsewhere. But maybe you're different. Maybe 20,000 is like enough, right? You're chop me off at 20. No, the question you want to hear that we do hear is how much premium am I allowed to pay? Right? When I got to go to the insurance company and to the underwriters and say, look, this guy gets it. He knows what he's doing. Open the floodgates. This is, by the way, the kind of client that comes out of an attraction-oriented marketing philosophy. All right, we've got worlds apart here. Everybody wants to know about investing. The whole financial world is subsumed with this idea of investing, investing, investing. By the way, academic financial economics, that entire field is devoted to portfolio allocation. It's an entire field about investing. No discussion whatsoever about capitalizing. To understand how capitalizing relates to investment, we have to distinguish the two. To capitalize is to accumulate financial value, money, in order to leverage and acquire wealth. Right? You could also liquidate, but as we've established, leverage is preferable. What you want to do is retain, if not maximize, control. As we said, liquidating is not optimal, And you do have the possibility of having guarantees, as everybody in this room should know. On the other hand, investing literally means to forfeit control of money. You're giving over the money to somebody else to go and generate you a return, either a passive or active cash flow or an eventual sale, right? Confusingly called then a capital gain. Or both, right? You might buy a house with the intent to rent. That rental property or that rental income is a cash flow to you. That house may also appreciate, right? So you're going to get a capital gain upon sale. Perfect example of investing. The idea, right, we talked about liquidation and capital. When you're capitalizing, we don't want to liquidate. We want to keep the asset to retain control over the future appreciation. But with investing, the whole idea is that you will eventually liquidate. Right? You're going to sell that house eventually based on the market if you've got a chance to earn that capital gain. If you're allocating in a portfolio, you're going to change the allocation. That involves selling off. Right? Another categorical distinction. And of course, in investing, there's no guarantees. All right. I think this is cool. This is really like some of the big implications of having a good understanding of capital. Because now we can discuss how we approach investing, which, by the way, no conventional financial advisor does. At least none that I've ever met or worked for. We can talk about opportunity, right? Investment opportunity is a source, or a type of opportunity. We can talk about opportunity for the undercapitalized, and we can talk about opportunity for the well-capitalized. 99.98% or more of people fall in this left-hand column. The financial tragedy of our time is that individuals are severely undercapitalized. So no wonder this world doesn't exist to the modern financial advisor. The vast majority of people are undercapitalized. So why talk about anything else other than investing? Right? This isn't even on their radar. But because we have a concentration on the cash value, because we have a concentration on financing, because we have a concentration on the cost of dependency on third-party lending, because we have that focus, we can talk about this distinction. All right, so let's talk about the average Joe first. Average Joe is severely undercapitalized, and his financial advisor tells him to max out his 401k. So he goes to his employer gives him a sheet of options. That sheet is that sheet has options that are few in number. They are mass marketed nationally, if not globally, and are therefore all exposed to the dangers of fractional reserve banking. And thank you, Bob, for doing Austrian Business Cycle before this so that I don't have to explain it, because I don't have time. Systematic risk. Systematic risk when you are undercapitalized and trying to invest. The relationship between the investor and the investments is one where the investor has to chase him down. That's why we got to pay financial advisors. That's why we got to pay experts, pay money managers. All of that involves search cost. And by the way, the cost of that is not just the dollars you spend, it is also the opportunity cost of all the lost interest and dividends that money otherwise could have earned you. And that money doesn't appear on that nice little sheet of costs, does it? No, but it's absolutely real. The idea of getting into entrepreneurship, investing in yourself, starting your own business, forget about it. You've invested. You have deliberately given up control of money. So what do you have to invest with? So entrepreneurship's never on the table as a conversation for strategy. Oh, and as a bonus, you're exposed to all of the costs of conventional lending. Amortization, use restrictions, lengthy time-consuming applications, physical collateral assignments, repayment schedules, hostile bill collections departments, dependency on bank personnel, the risk of a bank being bought out. All of that is under I didn't say anything about money. I didn't say anything about interest rates. All of that is involved in the cost of dependency on third-party capital. Oh, and you get things like amortization, where the interest rate by volume on a 30-year mortgage is maybe more or less 50%. I don't care what that little APR number says. It's irrelevant. Okay, let's do the happy stuff now. Opportunity for the well-capitalized. Everybody knows on some gut level that people with money have a unique problem. People with ideas, investment opportunities, entrepreneurship opportunities are beating the door down of people with money. And it's why people with money often don't tell other people that they have money. That's how bad the problem is. They have the opposite problem, that they have to select among the opportunities that come from them. I got this idea. This is Nelson Nashian to the core. There are two lines, one in becoming your own banker, one in building your warehouse of wealth, where Nelson says, I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, if you have control over a large pool of financial value, opportunity will track you down. In person, he says, though, opportunity will hunt you down. And the first time I read that line, I was like, okay, yeah, that's cute, next. No. That changes the entire relationship between the individual and opportunity. Opportunities come to you. You don't have to pay others to go find them and expose your wealth to the problems caused by fractional reserve banking. And of course, now we have an opportunity for entrepreneurship. Now we can talk about, what do you want to do? What are your God-given talents? What are the things you are going to monetize in your skill set? How are you going to take control of your income-generating capability? Now that's on the table in a conversation about financial strategy. And that's a conversation that doesn't happen with the conventional financial planner. Because we're not talking about building capital. We're not talking about preparing you to go and become an entrepreneur. Oh, and a bonus, we eliminate all that cost of dependency on third-party capital. And earn the interest and dividends that all that money now works for us. Okay, quick little thing. Why does this matter to the agents in this room? In 1988, the U.S. Senate committee had a subcommittee on debt management and taxation. They held hearings on the tax treatment of single premium dividend-paying whole life. Single premium whole life used to be the most cost-effective for the individual to get into the banking business. But now we have modified endowment contract rules. But they're out for your protection. Okay. The accusation from the colluding special interests, including A.L. Williams, was that these people, these dirty rich people, are out there earning investment returns without paying investment tax. Everybody in this room should know what's wrong with that. These people were not investing. You're not even using the right vocabulary. The bad part was the collusion, right? The special interests lobbying the government to eliminate the competition. But the worst part was the pathetic defense offered by the other providers of whole life. And we'll get into that in a minute. This is Senior Executive Vice President, then Miss Barbara King of A.L. Williams. This third bullet point is what I want you to pay attention to. She says, because of the liberal distribution rules and the tax-deferred nature of single premium products, they are also competing unfairly with legitimate investment products. A muni bond can't compete with SPs, nor can a CD, nor an annuity, nor a treasury note. So why in the world would we want to sell them? Let's get rid of them. What? That doesn't even make sense. In fact, the opposite is true. If you're well capitalized and you have opportunities flowing to you and you can therefore invest, you're going to pay more investment tax. The argument's not even logically consistent. No discussion of that from this panel. We had a French anarchist quoted earlier. Awesome. This is a French classical liberal who's attributed to have said, that the worst thing that can happen to a good cause is not to be skillfully attacked, but to be ineptly defended. We need a sound defense, and none was provided at that hearing. As my mentor James Nethery says, but they got their toe in the door. And guess what? They're coming back. I don't know when, and I don't know who it is in this room, but someone could be called. One of you in this room could be called. Maybe it's you sitting on that panel. Maybe it's a colleague of yours. You could say, hey, look, by the way, what we're doing has nothing to do with what they accused us of last time. And maybe those senators ought to know that. All right, some conclusions and some future directions here. We ought to revive Menger 1888. Hey, maybe we should even translate it. There's an idea. Yeah, capital is homogenous and monetary. From that, we get the fact that becoming your own banker is applied Mengerian capital theory. By the way, if you're an Austrian and you care about financial strategy, that means that you cannot ignore this book. You're not giving a fair hearing without reading Becoming Your Own Banker. And if we do so, we'll understand, hopefully, that opportunity for the well-capitalized is an entirely different world. Now we attract opportunity. We reverse the flow that the conventional average Joe must face. And we can reintroduce entrepreneurship into the picture. For the industry, we need to recognize the economic foundations of whole life. This is not about investing. And as I said earlier, it may be you that's called. I literally put this slide in there last night. So thanks, Carlos, for talking about evil in level 3, making me look like a genius. Last Sunday, I went to church. I was baptized in October 2017. Thank you. Had a little personal issue with a friend Saturday night. Woke up Sunday morning, went to church a little down, and was totally refreshed. The sermon was on the Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment, come on. The Fifth Commandment. Haven't been going to church that long, okay? Honor thy father and thy mother. My father flew from California to be here today to see this. And in that sermon, the pastor said there's 3 ways you can do that, and it follows the life cycle. In your early years, you can obey them. Might have struggled with that one. In your next years, you can respect them. And in the final years, you can care for them. And like a bolt of lightning, it struck me that the reason I do this is so that I can be prepared to care for my parents if they should so need it. And by the way, I'm not just doing it for me. Because every one of my clients will be well capitalized, certainly more capitalized than they otherwise would be, they too can live up to the Fifth Commandment. So compared to all the other financial garbage that is out there, this is good. This is good. So thank you, Nelson, for giving us this. And I know what you'd say. You'd say that good seed needs fertile soil, and a telephone is useless unless there's someone on the other end. So thank you for your humility and your grace and the example you served to me and everybody in this room. Thank you very much. Are we done? Yeah, questions, and I think the mic's coming to you. Oh, come on. I wasn't that. There's questions. He's right here, second row in the middle. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Hillside, yes, sir. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah. It was Jonathan Mast who gave the sermon. In Lubbock, yeah.
Okay, if you have a question about his talk, that'd be great. Make sure you get the microphone first so I can capture the question. Either that, he's going to have to repeat the question.
I can repeat the question.
Okay, is there anything else?
Yes, sir.
Timeline on translation?
Questions, what's the timeline on translation? I ran the quote. It costs about $4,000 to get it professionally well done. So someone's got, yeah. I mean, it's available. My goal would be, though, to have like a Mises Institute or a Liberty Fund do it. Someone who can, get a proper German-speaking Austrian economists to do it, to make sure all the meaning translates. Yes, sir, in the back. Yes, sir. The website that has these slides is medium.com / the @ sign, Ryan D. Griggs. My name, Ryan D. Griggs. So that's medium.com / Ryan D. Griggs. Yes, sir. Yeah, oh, thank you. Yes, I did. Oh, yeah, that's right. Wow, that was smart. Yeah, it's also on the Nelson Nash Practitioners Facebook page. Thank you. Oh, yes, very good. Very good. Anybody else? It was that good, huh? We're all clear. Austrian Capital Theory, ready to take the test. Hey, Bob, we can update the test. Make it even harder, right? Okay. All right. Thank you all very much.